ahead and pull up the patch notes. We can start going on this now. Here, return announcements, community update. It's funny because the patch notes actually came out at, like, right after I stopped streaming yesterday, so I didn't get to go over those. But now that the patch is already live, we can start talking about them now. There are some pretty interesting changes in here today. So crafting mastery gets a nerf by 0.1% per level. So ultimately what this means is everyone's going to have less stats by about 1% in-game, because most people will end up around crafting level 10. 1% is not going to be a huge deal, especially since this is affecting every character in the game. So mostly this just means people are going to be less tanky and doing less damage. I think this will affect damage the most, because defensive stats are one of those things that, like, the more you have of it, the less effective it is. HP mastery increase per level goes down, so people will have less HP overall. This is mostly a big impact to characters with large health pools such as Magnus and Yuki. They did end up having absurdly large HP pools with HP mastery, but this also hurts characters with low like the extremely low HP pools like Shoichi, because HP mastery was kind of a way to help fix their glass cannon, you know, identity. Defense mastery gets normal attack reduction reduced. This is really good for auto attack builds. We specifically will be enjoying this change because Magnus is that's really where all of my damage is coming from. And then max SP increase per mastery. This is pointless in my opinion. Like, I really don't care about this, because you're either going to have so much SP regen you don't care what your max SP is, or you're going to have so many SP items that, like, you really don't care either. I guess this matters for people who rely on items, because you could run into the issue where your SP items are over, you know, healing your SP, but I don't think it's gonna matter too much. Here they're talking about combining LP variations between placement and kills, because they're talking about here that Hyejin's win rate was statistically lower than the average, which shows a bad character by default, but she's averaging way more kills than usual, and because of that, Hyejin is technically, like, above average on their net LP, which means this character is technically above the bar. So really what they're saying here is they're looking at a wider variety of data from this point on, deciding on who they're buffing and who they're nerfing. Moist, thank you for the tier the resubscription. Daddy. How you doing today? We're going over the patch notes right now. We're not too far in. All I see is nerfs for my boy Yuki. Yuki doesn't personally get touched in here. You gotta think, these are all nerfs to characters overall, so he's not personally getting touched. Yuki will be fine. Adriana buffs, these are actually really nice, especially the attack power per level. This is kind of what I've been wanting to see out of Adriana. I think with the attack power and defense per level, she might finally be on the par where we can say she'll be performing at the same level as Isol. Isol's another character who's a low tier player, but his problem is that he just takes a lot more work to actually function, and I think Adriana will be in the same area where she can win games if played optimally, so to speak. Unlike someone like Jackie, who you can kind of just unga bunga your way through the whole game and not really have to care. Speaking of, she gets a buff on dual swords. I think this isn't needed at all. In fact, I'm questioning why this is even here. This is such a negligible amount. 0.01 base attack speed. Like, this is such a pointless change. Kiara's getting a nerf on HP regen per level. And then her ultimate's getting reduced damage per second. I don't know how big of a change this is actually going to be. One of the things I think that puts Kiara in such a high tier is her ability to just naturally sustain and drain tank her opponents. Having her defensive stats reduced, which this kind of does in its own way. This is reducing her damage, but it's also reducing how much she's getting healed by it, because she does heal for a portion of the damage she deals with it. This will make it so that people are able to actually DPS their way through her ultimate more often, and we're gonna have to see if the matchup changed for Magnus any. Fiora Q will be improved a bit more in our next update. Since both Spear and Two-Handed are a bit on the stronger side, we're trying to improve our stats while not influencing her balance. So what they're saying here is they understand that Rapier... Oh, hold on. I'm lagging so much, I'll be back on the stream when I'm back home. Alright, Moist, we'll see you later. It's the League of Legends curse. They always say they nerfed her buff with 0001 buffs. I think Kiara did need a nerf. Kiara is definitely strong. Like, a lot of people are agreeing that she's probably in the S tier category. I put her at high A, and I feel like this is a reasonable nerf for the character because her ultimate really is just insanely powerful. I'd like to see it toned down a little bit, and I don't think it's actually gutting the character at all. So they're admitting here that Fiora has an issue with Rapier, but Spear and Two-Hand are okay. The funny thing about this to me is that I don't think this is a problem with Fiora. Fiora, when playing Spear and Two-Hand, actually really performs well, especially on Spear, because there are weapons she can build, like, that actually impact her character and the way she wants to play. Rapier's issue is a lot of the pathing on their weapons is just terrible. Absolutely, it feels bad to play. Almost none of the weapons are any good, and this is actually one of the things that is keeping Kiara from being like a dominating force more than Dylin is. She doesn't have a weapon that she wants to build that's easy to do. She plays Mistleton because it's the best stat wise, but it takes forever to get online. It takes like 4 zones, 3 at least, I think. But anyway, so they're buffing Fiora Rapier's base attack speed. Oh yeah, so we have more emo slots as well now because we did hit 20. So I shifted the tier 2 emote to tier 1, so now tier 1 subs can use the sleeping tree. Part in duo and squads is getting a damage increase. Insignificant. Doesn't matter to me because I'm a solos only player. Lee Dylin fixed a significant bug related to drink up. So improved problem with being stunned too easily when using R to attack instead of reducing its escape power. This is pretty nice, I think, because I heard, according to this, Lee Dylin is supposed to use her drink up ability. I'll actually pull it up here really quickly on the scene. Lee Dylin takes a drink, gaining liquid strength and increasing her BAC. When she has liquid strength, the damage from her next normal auto attack and damage from dialed in are increased depending on her BAC. Now, the problem with this is it wasn't going away after her auto attack, so it was pretty much just staying there for the entire duration, and all of her auto attacks, as long as she was constantly using W, were improved. So that was increasing her damage by quite a bit. Well, I'll actually have to see if it helps the matchup any, because that extra damage she's no longer getting might shift it in our favor. She gets a 30 HP nerf as well. Not really important, I think, but this actually does have compounding effects along with HP mastery. So it could impact the game a little. It definitely did, because she did the ribbon thing where she Q, auto Q. It's actually Q and 2 autos, so it's a little more impactful than you think. Ultimate as well. Ultimate gets a nerf on cooldown, but the cooldown's basically the same as long as she makes contact with an enemy. The reason for this is Dylin could use her ultimate to get out of a fight and pretty much have it back up before she would ever really fight again. She's also now immune to CC. This is actually huge, because there was a thing where if you were worried about Lee Dylin ulting you as Magnus, you could buffer your E and cancel the ability before it would hit you, so you would basically waste her ultimate. This is no longer possible. Oh, sorry, I forgot to pull it back up. Yeah, so right here, she's unable to be stopped. So basically, she's immune to CC. You can no longer cancel her ultimate, which actually ruins a lot of matchups. We're just gonna have to hope that the reduced damage she'll do now is gonna make up for that. Shoichi gets a 50 HP nerf. I actually thought this was pretty funny because I don't think this helps him much at all. But this doesn't help spell amp, but this really helps the auto attack build that I was working with. I don't think it's worth doing still, We'll have to see if eventually Shoichi ends up being some kind of hybrid or mixed carry. Weapons. A lot of weapons got shifted around. They're talking about increasing the power of the least used weapons. So we'll see some pretty interesting things here. He isn't totally bad, but he's really weird at the moment. I agree. So Golden Rifle gets nerfed. This was because people would be playing Golden Rifle because it has 2 developments it can go into. We'll pull up Golden Rifle really quickly. We actually were seeing this the other day when I was playing. Golden Rifle can build into NTW and Deadly Ray. Golden Rifle's issue was that it was so close in power to NTW that you would just sit on Golden Rifle and then you would wait for Deadly Ray pretty much every time, because you weren't losing much damage by doing it. So they've nerfed that strategy. Doesn't really have that same kind of effect anymore. Back to this. We're seeing God, I went way far down. Assault rifles, AK-12 and XCR gets a buff. I personally really like this because I've enjoyed playing XCR-I lately. So we'll see that being a little bit stronger. Magnum Boa gets a buff. I don't think Magnum Boa is actually... This doesn't entice me to play Magnum Boa because Magnum Boa is the Spell Amp one, isn't it? Let's pull it up. No, actually, no. Magnum Boa is pretty solid. Magnum Boa is basically statue for pistols. I would play this. I'll show it to y'all later. I want to get through the rest of these. Actually, I really like it. Rapier, Mistleton gets nerfed, 3% CDR. Durandal gets a buff. I actually saw Texty playing a Durandal build the other day. This may... I don't know if this actually pushes you to think about playing that more. Personally, I think Mistleton is still really good. 3% CDR doesn't push me away from wanting to use it. Tonfa, they get 0.2% seal amp per mastery increase, which that's huge. This is a buff to all Tonfas, and tactical gets another 5%. I was working on a Hyunwoo tactical Tonfa build for a while, and I might pick it up again now because of these buffs. We'll definitely have to see if it improves it any. Vibroblade gets a buff. Karnwenen gets a buff. This, in my opinion, is negligible. This weapon's just so bad. Like, there's no reason for you to ever play this over Mount Slicer. Vibroblade is cool on my auto attack Jackie. Vibroblade's really good. Dagger Jackie definitely has its place in the meta. So Fang Mace gets a nerf, and this is pretty interesting. This is them signaling that they think Fang Mace is just way too overused compared to the other hammers. I feel like this is just an oversight on their end, because if we pull this up, if I wanted to play Hammer Magnus, I only have one option if I want to play Spell Amp. I have to play Fang Mace. Hammer's only played for Spell Amp, so it's like the rest of these don't matter. It's nerfing Fang Mace doesn't make me want to use Hammer of Thor. It makes me want to play Umbrella. You know? So I think this is just a really odd choice, in my opinion, for what to do by them. I don't think it's the direction they need to be moving. Magic Stick gets a buff. That's always really nice. It's your upgrade from Fang Mace if you happen to get the items and decide to want to build it. Bow, attack speed per mastery gets an increase by 0.2%. Golden ratio gets buffed. I actually hate to see this because this is Nadine buffs and I don't think she needs buffs. This is also technically Heijin, but Heijin doesn't do golden ratio. She does twin bows. Ballista gets a buff to movement speed and attack speed. It's still negative overall, but you know, I've seen Nadine's play Ballista a few times. I don't think this entices you to want to play Ballista over the golden ratio Expo instead. David Sling gets a buff for throw. I've seen some people trying to use this. This makes it a little more enticing. Grenade of Antonov gets a buff. I don't think this fixes its problem. Grenade's issue is that it has too low of charges to actually be used consistently. You have to build at least 2 or 3 to actually fight with your weapon, which I think is throw's inherent weakness. Flechette gets a buff. Flechette was already in a good spot. I don't think this needed to be buffed, but you know, it's welcome to see different things be brought into the meta anyways. Cards of Tyranny gets a buff, and Fuma Shuriken. Fuma Shuriken has been seen a resurgence lately as Cecilia becomes more popular. This could make the CDR builds on Cecilia actually really good. We'll have to see. Divine Fist and Brazil Gauntlets gets a buff. I don't think you ever play Brazil Gauntlets even with this, but this does make Divine Fist more enticing because the issue is Divine Fist is a parallel build with Frost Gauntlets. And Frost Gauntlets are strictly better in most cases than Divine Fists. The more Divine Fist gets buffed, the more that no longer becomes the case, and you can run Divine Fist builds. If Cards of Tyranny gets 2 to 3 more buffs, then maybe Heijin Auto is possible. It could be. Spy Umbrella, we talked about this a second ago. It gets 10 more attack power. So as I said, they've already nerfed Fang Mace. So it just makes Spy Umbrella a little more appetizing. If you want to play Spellant Magnus, this is possibly the way you want to go from now. Armors. Dragon Debak gets a nerf. I don't know if this was even called for, to be honest. I don't think Dragon Debak is anywhere near being an overwhelming presence. Same as Amazon Armor, it gets a 10 defense nerf. I don't think this was needed. Auto Arms gets a nerf. That's fair. Auto Arms is pretty good. Both versions of White Crane Fan get nerfed. Just a little bit of skill amp. Flower of Fate gets a buff in crit strike, and Red Shoes goes up. It's mostly used with Ayas. That is true. Now, and Yuki. Yuki is also a big abuser of Dragon Debak, as well as Ice-Soul, but the Ice-Soul and Aya share builds sometimes, so that's expected. My biggest issue with all of this, we're going to shift over to the game really quickly. This doesn't address the issues in the meta, in my opinion. So at the moment, we're seeing White Crane Fan is constantly used. It's not used because of its skill amp. It's used because of healing reduction. Healing reduction is not widespread enough that you have enough options to pick from. So because of that, you're shoehorned into White Crane Fan or White Rhinos. You're running one or the other. You really just don't have a choice unless your weapon has it, but that's not accessible to everybody. Not everyone can build a weapon with healing reduction. So as they nerf White Crane Fan, that just pushes the people who don't have to use it more into Uchiwa, which Uchiwa is already like a really strong weapon or accessory. What they need to be doing is they either need to shift around what items have healing reduction, create new items that have healing reduction, or give me a reason to run Sword Stopper, because this thing's terrible. Honestly, it's the shittiest weapon in the game. Or not weapon, but arm piece. Even if I was looking at my build and I said like, man, I can't fit healing reduction anywhere, I'm not running Sword Stopper. I'll throw on Sajahan instead and just rough it out. Like, this needs to be reworked. Normal attack or damage reduction is nice, but I'm not gonna throw on something with just defense for that reason. Either give it 0.1 movement speed, give it skill damage reduction, or give it health. And then it might actually be an option that I'd be happy to play. The other ones, armor pieces. So we just saw a nerf to Amazoness chest, and we just saw a nerf to what was the other one? Dragon Debak. In my opinion, the best armor piece in the game is Butler Suit. You see it everywhere. At least 3 people in the lobby are going to have it, if not more. It's one of the reasons feathers are so contested at the moment. Plus the fact that feather builds into everything with movement speed. Butler Suit probably needs to see a nerf at this point. It needs to probably see... I'd be okay with watching it get like 5 less LS and then 10 less attack power. I don't think you want to take off defense from normal attacks, because it's like... You want it to have a little bit of defense, you know? So, I don't understand why we're nerfing Amazoness chess over Butler Suit here. Because it's like, Butler Suit, I never see this. I've seen this maybe one time. If it loses the 0.1 MS, it will be less made. Yes, it will be less made, but they actually can't take that off because you get that 0.1 from Feather Duster. And if you haven't noticed, all items carry over the stats from their components. So if they took away the movement speed, they would actually have to build it with, they'd have to change what it's built with. So the movement speed will always be there. Your only options are to change the lifesteal, the attack power, or the defense that it gets. And the best option they have, in my opinion, is lowering the attack power and the LS, because this is an offensive chess piece. You build this when you are looking to do more damage and benefit off of your damage from lifesteal. So if we kind of take away from that identity a little bit, it can do better. Amazoness is very popular on Kiara. I mean, that's one character we're talking about. If only one character is able to abuse the armor piece well, then that's an issue with the character and not the armor piece, in my opinion. I'm not saying that, like, Amazoness shouldn't have been nerfed. I'm more so questioning why Butler's hasn't been nerfed. And until it is, I'm just going to keep abusing it, honestly. So that's pretty much it for the patch notes. There were 2 bug fixes involving missions and save plans. So if you ever ran into those problems, you won't anymore. Congrats.